Hi students, welcome to this presentation. It's an introduction to rhetorical analysis. So we wrapped up our previous writing project, our previous module. This is where we're headed into more of an analytical type of writing. Okay, and so this presentation is introducing you to rhetorical analysis at its most kind of basic level. And then as we progress through our module, we'll go in a little deeper. But so think of this as just an introduction. And the focus is going to be on introducing you to those, basic elements of rhetorical analysis and modeling how to analyze using critical thinking questions. So basic analysis, when you think of analysis and what it is, when we analyze something, we break it down. Okay, that's what analysis is. We break it down into smaller parts, categories, different areas, and examine those areas to get a better understanding of something as a whole. And so I'm trying to think of an example outside of, English class, right? Because this is something that you do in life and not just in an academic setting. But think of a painting. If you went to a museum and were looking at a painting and maybe you didn't know a lot about art, so when you first view a painting, and somebody says, well, what do you think this means? You might not know what to say or think about it. So you might look at different elements. So if we were looking at a piece of art, right, you might look at the actual content or subject matter. Maybe you Google information about the artist or read some, sometimes paintings have the biography next to the work of art. You might look for information about the time period. So that's more of context when you analyze something, which is good. Technique and medium, or the design elements, and so on. So you can see that once you start looking at the smaller elements of something, it helps you to better understand it and to make meaning. So rhetorical analysis is that. It's an analysis, or as your text calls it, a careful examination of a text. Anyone can do rhetorical analysis from, everything from commercials to essays to literature to song lyrics. I mean, you can use this for a lot of different things. And the reason we do this is obviously we want to understand something better, but it helps us, when we're thinking about ourselves as writers, it helps us to do better with our own communication, and of course it helps our critical thinking skills. Okay, so there are a few different elements that we look at. These are some of the basic ones, and some of these you've heard when we talked in our first module about critical thinking and questioning. Things like purpose, audience, context, strategies, everything from language and structure to the author or speaker. Okay, and so we will use some of these in just a little bit to kind of show you how you can use, how you can break these down by asking key questions. So what I would suggest you do is pause this presentation and go in and watch this video that I have linked in your unit. Okay, it's very short, so it won't take you long to do that, and then come back for a little bit more. Okay, so go ahead and do that now. Now that you have watched the TED Talk, let's take a look at that. So very short. You might not have had all the context, but this is the speaker is somebody who's in the content making world, filmmaker, digital creator, and so having that little bit of context kind of helps you get an understanding. But we want to look at those general questions. Who's the speaker? What is their credibility? Who is the intended audience for this text speech? What is the main goal? What is the purpose? In other words, why is the speaker writer making it? Okay, so when you look at this, let's tackle the first one. As we mentioned, this is a filmmaker, entertainer, speaker. You might have to look up information to learn more about your writers or your speakers, or if we were doing a painting, your artist, etc. Right? That always helps give us some context. So this person comes brings experience, and that experience that he has connects directly to the topic of speaking and connecting with an audience in the digital age. So yes, his credibility comes from his firsthand experiences and an understanding of digital platforms, right? And that's a lot of people have that experience now, but not everybody. So he comes to us with a little bit of credibility. And when you look at the intended audience, one of the reasons I chose this is because of the audience, right? So the interesting thing about TED Talks is there's a live audience, right? A captured audience in real time there at where they do the TED Talks. So very direct audience, but then there's actually another audience. There's a broader online audience that spans, the globe, really. Anybody could watch this. But also, interestingly, it spans time, right? This was, if you notice, this was, I think, given in maybe 2017. And so to some of us that seems like not long ago, but to others of us that seems like a very long time ago. And I think in the digital age that is a long time. And so he's also spanning time, which is kind of an interesting way to think of your audience, right? And anybody who's interested in this public speaking, communication, or modern digital age, anything that has to do with that, which probably tends to be generally a younger audience, but I would say that you could argue that. Now, so when we think about the purpose, this is where a lot of the meaning kind of comes into play. Like, okay, well, so what you might, when you first encounter this speech, you might say, like, what is going on here? What is this guy doing? What was the point of that, right? And that's a good question to ask because that ties into purpose. So his goal is to challenge the traditional expectations of these type of speeches that you give in, say, an environment like a TED Talk. And with the focus on, what does engagement mean in the digital era? So he's trying to put a spotlight on how our attention spans have changed and how speakers really, when you think about it, need to adapt, right? That's what I think of when I'm presenting is I'm like, this is too long, I need to make it shorter. So by giving this talk, he's actually demonstrating his point in real time. It's a minute long speech. And so the setting, when we talk about setting, we don't just mean place, but yes, it's at this TEDx place where they do these events. They do these events in all kinds of different locations, but this one is at the TEDx Mile High in front of a live audience. But setting also means social cultural context. So now we're in a culture of people that are always consuming content online and they want it in short, fast formats. So again, back to 2017, not that long ago, but then again it is, because now in 2025, where we are right now, that is a lot, we're even more so in that world than we were just a few years ago. So the time period, we're in the digital age where content has to be grabbed quickly or made short to grab attention quickly. Otherwise, you run the risk of it not being effective or memorable. Right? So these are some other questions I'm going to go into. I put these all questions on one slide so you can see, but I'm going to skip through those. You can come back to those later and just kind of touch on a few of these. So how effectively did the speaker engage the audience? This is where you've got the basic information from those general questions. Now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. Well, he grabbed attention immediately because he used humor, right? And a claim, I would call it a bold claim, not caring what the live audience thinks. Like, wow, really? If I was in the audience, I might be like, okay, dude. His 1 minute format, I think, kind of took some people by surprise, or in the very least, made them curious. Like, hey, what is this guy doing? Okay, how well did the speaker connect with the audience on a personal level? Well, that probably depends on the audience, but he probably connected with a large portion of that audience by referring to those behaviors that we members of the digital age relate with. Short attention spans, watching content on phones, that's who we are now. He's got that kind of conversational language that's felt approachable, but I think also, you know, to some people it may come across as off-putting, or they might not like the tone or may consider it rude. And I'm just saying that because I've shared this with students before and had a variety of reactions. How well did the speaker use supporting evidence or stories to strengthen the argument? Well, he didn't really use detailed evidence or personal stories because there wasn't time. So he kind of put all the money on the shared cultural experiences, the knowledge, and the humor. Those were his, quote, text moves that he was using to engage the audience, right? So he kind of, you know, he bet it all on that. And yeah, it came through like a TED Talk, but it was short and attention friendly, is how I would put it. Did the speech have a clear and memorable conclusion? Well, I would say in this case, yes. He's got that quick joke and that with that little inflation pun, and the way he treated it was like a mic drop moment, right? Like, and that's it, I'm out, right? Which is somewhat memorable. And then, you know, he reinforced the message, right? And made the talk feel complete, though I think that could be arguable. And when you come to the emotional impact, you know, you think of TED Talks as being very inspirational, but this one probably made the audience laugh and reflect a little bit, used the humor, tried to challenge our traditional thinking about what these type of presentations are all about. And, but again, another perspective, the audience might have felt kind of annoyed by the joke or the shortness of it. They wanted more out of it maybe, or the speaker's tone. So I think some of these things can be, you know, debated. Did the speech offer any new insights or perspectives? Yes. It questions the idea that these type of talks have to be really long and meaningful. Or it highlighted how audiences should shape the way we communicate. And did the speech inspire the audience to think differently or take action? So yes, I think on the surface, it might have seemed superficial. If you hadn't gone back and really kind of analyzed it and dig a little deeper, you realize, oh, he's actually kind of challenging us to rethink how we present ideas in the digital age. Okay, and so not quite inspirational, but hey, you know, definitely, you know, how much can you do in a minute? And, you know, that's, to me, that seems like a new challenge. So that is an example of how you can use those questions to dig deeper and do an analysis and understand your text better. And so that's what we're doing this week. So you have some assignments you're going to work on. The Smart Book is introducing you to the concept of rhetorical analysis and how to write one. We'll come back to that, so don't get too bogged down in the specifics of that. We will learn more about this. Journal assignment. You are going to choose a speech and you are going to practice the art of questioning on a text using questions very similarly to what I did in this presentation. Okay, so go forth and analyze and have fun with it, and I will be here if you have any questions.